Cormani McClain shocked the recruiting world once this fall. Could he do it again with 2 weeks until signing day? Plus, we're talking to one of the architects behind bringing Coach Prime to Boulder. And now that he's there, is Deion building a short-term success, or will he bring the Buffs back to a national power? The College Football Recruiting Show starts right now. Welcome, welcome. Alongside Blair Angulo, I'm Emily Proud. Thanks for joining the show. Please submit any questions you have in the chat, and we will answer them at the end. But let's get things rolling with the headlines. How about it, Blair? Yesterday, with exactly 2 weeks to go until signing day, we're dusting off the Wiltfong spatula. Ruben Owens, the #1 running back in the class, flipped his commitment from Louisville to Texas A&M. Putting the pieces together, we do assume that the Cardinal coaching changes had something to do with this, Blair?
Yes, Emily, in part yes, but it's also another indication of Texas A&M's recruiting pool at the moment. They didn't have the greatest season, and obviously there's going to be a lot of roster turnover with the Aggies, but there's a bunch of talent in College Station, and Ruben Owens sounded really excited to be part of that movement.
More on him in a bit. Meanwhile, the #3 offensive lineman in the 23 class will take an official to Florida this weekend. Samson Okunlola making his second trip to the Swamp, but Miami is the crystal ball favorite. So Blair, we sure do love these recruiting battles in the Sunshine State.
Aren't they the best battles? It's Florida, it's Miami, it's two programs that are jostling for a top 10 finish here in the 2023 recruiting cycle. Miami is already pacing for that right now. The Gators have some work to do to get into the top 10, but they get their shot with Samson Okunlola, who took his trip to Miami already in the summer. Now it's Mario Cristobal versus Billy Napier, so buckle up.
Well, speaking of, Cormani McClain may not be so solid at Miami. Per our Gabby Urrutia of Inside the U, the 5-star corner is considering an official visit to Alabama this weekend. Gabby added things are trending toward him not taking the visit, but nothing is set in stone here. Blair, what does this all mean?
It means we're less than 2 weeks out from signing day, and things are getting a little bit spicy. We didn't get obviously a lot of things there right at the end of Cormani McClain's commitment. I think he really came off the board maybe unexpectedly. I think we all thought he would come in to closer to the signing day, but we also didn't expect Nick Saban to all of a sudden give up. So this is a clear indication that Cormani McClain will remain a hot name all the way until the coveted signature is in on December 21st.
Expect the unexpected. Let's make it 3 straight headlines talking Gators. Why don't we? DJ Lagway, the 4-star quarterback in the 2024 class, committed to Florida yesterday. They now have a top 10 class with 3 commitments. Blair, do the Gators now have their face of the class in Lagway?
Yeah, absolutely. Florida fans had to wait a little bit to eventually get great news on the quarterback front with Jaden Rashada when he flipped from Miami. And now DJ Lagway allows the Gators to start recruiting the 2024 class really early, heading into the spring, heading into those important official visits. And this is an important part because he can give the pitch to other recruits. He can allow himself to become a peer recruiter. And obviously that will help with the Gators and what they want to build in Gainesville.
All right, the recruiting news is heating up, so let's welcome in our director of recruiting, Steve Wiltfong, to give us some of that intel. I want to start with Ruben Owens. We mentioned the coaching change as a possible factor, but what ultimately drew him to Texas A&M?
Well, I think ultimately it was the coaching change that really put that in motion. Now, look, when he committed to Louisville back in the summer, there were people that projected that he would ultimately end up in Texas A&M's class when said and done. So I don't think that's many are surprised in the end that he's going with Texas A&M, a program that he nearly committed to well before he committed to Louisville as well. So, but certainly it helped accelerate the process if there was going to be a flip with Scott Satterfield taking the job and the coaching turnover on the staff. But he told Jimbo Fisher on Wednesday that he was in the fold, and then announced later that night, giving Texas A&M, a young man that's rushed for over 7,000 yards in his high school career, over 100 touchdowns, and a guy that I think can be an instant impact player for them in College Station. As they close, they're going to be fun to watch here down the stretch here. Pound for pound, guys, it's the top 5 recruiting class right now for Texas A&M. Ruben Owens, one of the jewels.
Yeah, Steve, obviously this is a byproduct also of Louisville recruiting well earlier in the recruiting cycle, but I know a lot of fans might be sweating bullets right now considering some of the names that are at the top of their commit list. What do you expect to happen with names like DeAndre Moore and Pierce Clarkson and maybe some of the other top commits that Louisville has in their class right now?
Well, DeAndre Moore is one that's been on flip watch for a while as well. Took official visits to Georgia and Texas. I've heard good things about Texas's position as of late there with DeAndre Moore. So we'll see if Louisville can hang on to him. Pierce Clarkson, our colleague Greg Biggins, national analyst who's based in LA and has done a lot of Bosco games on TV, says that Jeff Brom's going to be out at Clarkson State Championship game on Saturday. Certainly there's some schools that have reached out to him, but I think that he is excited about the hiring of Brom, and how can you not? He's showcased some of the finest offenses in college football year in and year out. And I think Jeff Brom is a guy that college coaches use as a resource when they're trying to elevate their own offenses. So if you're Pierce Clarkson, you're certainly excited about Jeff Brom coming to Louisville. And I don't know if that's going to. I don't know if anything's going to change with his recruitment over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Brom, within just the last hour, officially named the next head coach at Louisville. He returns home, got a great track record at Purdue. You mentioned the success there on offense, but what kind of recruiter is he?
I think that, he's a guy that's really good in the living room. If you get in front of Jeff Brom, you can see the energy and passion that he has for football and his team, and he's a player's coach. People like playing for him, and so I think when you get on campus and you get around the players, you get a good feel for the culture and the vibe that he has in the locker room and the way that the players enjoy playing for him. Stanquan Clark's another guy I wanted to mention as a high-profile recruit in Louisville's class that a lot of people are certainly trying to kick tires on here down the stretch. I talked to a source earlier in the week that thought that he would still ultimately end up in the fold for Louisville, but there's several schools still trying to make a push here late.
Yeah, Steve, obviously a loss for Purdue with Jeff Brom taking over at Louisville. But what kind of coach does Purdue need now to replace him?
Well, there's so many good candidates out there. So while I'm about to highlight one, that doesn't mean that I think it's this man and nobody else. But Michigan offensive coordinator Sharon Moore, I think, would be an exciting hire for Purdue. I think he's one of the best recruiters in the country. He's obviously one of the best offensive line coaches in the country, as Michigan won the Joe Moore Award last year. And now he's moved into the position as Michigan's play caller. And I think that Michigan's offense has become one of the more exciting ones in the Big Ten. I think that this is a guy, I believe I said on this show a few weeks ago, would eventually become a household name around the country as far as college football coaches go. And I think this is a coach that Purdue should at least look into, interview, and get to know, because Sharon Moore is incredibly well respected amongst his peers. The players love him. Great recruiter. Obviously, great offensive line coach, showing well in his first year as the play caller for the Maize and Blue. Purdue should take a look at Sharon Moore.
All right, guys, we took about a 5-minute break from talking about Florida, so let's go back to the Sunshine State. One of the biggest official visit weekends is about to take place in Gainesville, and the list is highlighted by Okunlola, who we mentioned. The crystal ball favors Miami, but this is not his first trip to UF. So, Steve, where do the Gators stand in his recruitment?
Oh, man, they're gaining momentum fast here going into his college commitment next week. I think that Florida's got an excellent chance. He loved his visit there a couple weeks ago. He's really clicked with offensive line coach Rob Sale. Got a chance to spend a lot of time with Billy Napier on his last visit. And he likes the trajectory of Florida's program. Certainly they have a big need on the offensive line. They're trying to finish strong. That's one of their big positions of need as they try and finish with a top 10 class, currently sitting number 11. And I wouldn't be surprised if when Samson Okunlola commits next week, he's in the fold for the Gators. Now, Miami's certainly not going away. They've impressed him a ton. Mario Cristobal and company have been near the top of his list, as you said, for much of the process. But Florida definitely making things interesting at the very least here at the end.
A lot of really fun recruiting battles between Billy Napier and Mario Cristobal. And Napier has a chance with a number of other high-profile targets this weekend, Steve. A huge weekend for the Gators down in Gainesville. You take into account Mark Fletcher, the former Ohio State commit, and there's a few other players that are currently committed to other schools that will be down at Florida. Who will you have your eye on?
Yeah, Caden Jones is a 6'8", 300+ offensive lineman from the state of Louisiana that Billy Napier and company got in early on. I logged a 24/7 Sports crystal ball for the Gators this week for Caden after talking to him. So if they can add Okunlola and Caden Jones to what's already in the fold, that would be one of the best offensive line hauls in the SEC. Jaden Platt's a tight end that's been committed to Stanford since last December, guys. But with David Shaw retiring, it's opened the door for schools like Florida and Texas A&M to come in. And he's a high academic kid, and I think Florida, that's another thing that they'll look to sell this weekend with their prestigious public school academics. It's some of the best in the country there. So I think Florida can make a move for him. And then John Walker is a top 247 defensive lineman that's committed to UCF that Florida's gotten to campus several times in the fall. They love him. They already have a very talented defensive line haul, but you can't have enough big bodies up front that can be difference makers. Florida's defensive line was subpar by Florida standards the last few years. John Walker, major target for them as they try and finish out this class.
All right, Steve, it almost feels like schools are having to re-recruit players who enter the transfer portal. I mean, we have visits, offers, just like they were in high school. So I want to dip into the portal talk real quick with you. Former Virginia corner Fentrell Cypress, currently our number 2 player overall in the portal. He's been targeted by schools like UCLA, Ohio State, USC, Florida State, Auburn. That's almost all the schools in the country. A lot of other ones. What's the latest with his portal recruitment?
Well, last I talked to his camp yesterday, a visit was in the works for UCLA this weekend. Things could really accelerate by then, but the Bruins have done a good job of getting in early with this young man. And so sounds like they're a contender. I think he's high on Ohio State. I think LSU is a program that's made an impression. Texas has been in early. Tennessee had a long conversation with Mike Reed and Clemson. Florida State went in home. A lot of people swinging on the number 1 ranked player in the 24/7 Sports transfer portal rankings.
All right, Steve, thank you so much for all of that great intel. Be sure to check out the Wiltfong Whip Around on Mondays and Fridays. And you want more Steve? Well, you are in luck. He will be a massive part of our National Signing Day show, so join him and all of us on December 21st right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. Blair, do you remember how we started our week? Deion Sanders named the head coach at Colorado. That just happened Sunday. So understandably, Colorado fans and alum are still buzzing, and they never stop. So we invited one of those buzzing buffs to tell us all about it. Let's welcome in a very special guest to the show. It's 2-time Olympic skier and former NFL wide receiver Jeremy Bloom. Jeremy, welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, you are clearly a man of many talents, reaching the highest levels of 2 different sports, and what you're doing now is a CEO of a software company. But somehow, among that busy schedule, you've also found time to help your alma mater in a massive way. I hear Buffs fans should be thanking you. What's the story behind how you helped get Deion to Colorado?
Oh, I don't know about that, but Rick George, the athletic director, deserves all the credit in getting Deion to Boulder. But I played a supporting role on October 2nd when the coach was let go here in Boulder. I called Rick and I said, we got to go get Deion Sanders. And I felt strongly about that at the time because for really 2 reasons. One, I thought he was the only coach in the country that could really energize this fan base overnight. But secondarily, and more importantly, he was the only coach in the country that I thought could bring 5-star recruits and 4-star recruits to Boulder, Colorado, which has been a really hard thing to do for coaches. If you look at our history over the past 100 years, CU's only had 3 5-star high school recruits commit and come to the program. And Rick was receptive, and after I hung up the phone, I called a few of my NFL friends that I knew had really good relationships with Deion to help them sell the idea in the beginning. So Steve Smith was a guy who was really instrumental as well, and Brandon Marshall and Sean Merriman and Myron Roll. So, look, I would do anything for my alma mater. I just want to see us win again. I want us to see us be relevant again. It's been a tough 2 decades, really. I mean, we haven't been competitive on a national scene in quite some time.
Yeah, Jeremy, Colorado's a program that has experienced success in the past, but this current version hasn't been the best, coming off the worst season in school history. So although it was probably easy to sell Colorado fans on Deion, how difficult and how did you sell Colorado to Deion?
Well, really what sold Deion to Colorado was Rick George. In their first conversation, Deion didn't ask him a single question about the University of Colorado, about the football program, just wanted to get to know Rick a little bit better. And Rick was really able to build a great bond and great relationship with Deion that Deion talked about at the press conference. But beyond that, Boulder, Colorado is a really special place. And, if you look at the best places to live every year of all these studies that come out, Boulder, Colorado is consistently in the top 5. It's a special town. You got great facilities here. You got an indoor practice facility. You got great locker rooms. It's in the Pac-12. It's a Power 5 school. And so everything's set up for you to win. It's just a matter of getting the right coaches and the right kids here to go compete for a championship.
Sounds like a pretty easy sell. Meanwhile, the Pac-12, with its uncertain future, can only benefit from having Deion as a part of it. Pac-12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff said literally yesterday that Deion adds value to the current media rights negotiations. How do you view his impact on the conference as a whole?
Well, I think it's good for the conference. I think it's good for the state of Colorado. I think it's good, obviously, for the university, but I think it's good for college football in general. He is an entertaining guy, so bring your popcorn because this is going to be interesting. It's going to be entertaining. And no matter what happens, you kind of can't lose, right? It's a 1-11 program. So maybe it was a risk or maybe it was not, depending on how you look at it. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. CU's back on the national map already. 5-star recruits are already committing to the University of Colorado. Travis Hunter, which was the #1 recruit in the nation last year, Deion convinced him to go to Jackson State over LSU and Georgia and Clemson. It just shows the power that Deion has. Winston Watkins, which is another 5-star recruit out of Fort Myers, Florida, sophomore in high school, has already committed to the University of Colorado. A junior college All-American is transferring here. And Trey Sanders, apparently a running back from Alabama, is interested in coming here as well. So, the tide's already turning. The signs are already showing up that his impact is far and wide. And to your point around attention, you can't even buy a box at Folsom Field next year. They're all sold out. They sold out within 24 hours of him coming here. I'm on a waiting list, and a lot of people are as well. So there's a lot of attention, there's a lot of excitement, and Buff fans are showing up, buying tickets, and donating to the program so we can make sure to get Deion paid.
Well, Jeremy, if you ever get at the top of that list, make sure I'll send you a message, see if I can make my way into a suite as well. The interesting thing that you mentioned about the recruiting impact, right? He's bringing eyeballs, he's bringing attention to the program, and he can elevate them to recruit at a top 15, top 10 level just on name alone, right? And I feel like he's going to have a ton of potential to get prospects to come to Boulder, which is a big hurdle that the previous staffs have had. It's a difficult trip. It's a trip maybe a lot of recruits haven't taken before. What do you envision Deion being able to do in terms of his impact in bringing in top talent?
Well, Blair, this is as well as anybody. This is a game of talent. This is a game of get the most talented players on the field, and you got a great chance to compete for national championships. I mean, it's not a surprise why Alabama and Georgia and Clemson compete for national championships every year, is because they get all the 5-stars. And of course, there's other schools as well, but Colorado's never been in that conversation. We've always had to be competitive with 2 and 3 stars, which in some years we have been. I mean, in 2001, Big 12 champs, 2002, Big 12 North champs, in 1990, of course, national champs. And really did so with not the best recruits in the country. So look, if Deion can bring some of that magic here to Boulder, which he's already doing, he does have a long way to go still. I mean, this is a lot of folks are leaving Colorado. A lot of commitments have decommitted. We expected that. So he's got to fill that bucket. He's got a long way to go to build this program, build the roster, and build the coaching staff. But it's only been a week, so we're still relatively new into all of this.
Yeah, I mean, along those lines, there's clearly a lot of excitement. You talk about the impact in recruiting. There's also the transfer portal, which is a major part of the sport nowadays. So how quickly can we expect to reap those benefits from the Deion rebuild?
Emily, it's never been easier to turn around a program overnight because of the transfer portal. I mean, kids can go wherever they want. They have the power now. There's a level of equity in college football and college athletics that's never existed before. And so it's just a matter of, the talent that he can get here. And I understand the portal to be lighting up for CU.
I'm not hard to find.
I think there's a record amount of players, really good players across the country, not just high school players, but players at other Power 5 schools who now want to come play for Deion Sanders. And why wouldn't you? I mean, this guy is a legend. He's a 2-time Super Bowl champ. He's one of the best dual sport athletes in history. He turned around Jackson State. He brought 5-star recruits to Jackson State, which is absolutely unheard of, unprecedented what he did. And in fact, in my own life, he's one of my biggest heroes. And one of the reasons I wanted to be a 2-sport athlete in football and skiing, because I was watching what Deion Sanders was doing on the football field and on the baseball field. So he's a legend. It's really exciting for this town. This town is on fire. I live in Boulder, Colorado. I've never seen the buzz this high for CU football, and you got to dig it.
And Jeremy, I don't want to be a downer, but with all this buzz and the trajectory that Deion Sanders is on, you maybe wonder how long he might be at Colorado. What if he's only there for 2 or 3 years, and this is maybe only a stepping stone job towards the next place? What do you think happens to the Buffaloes?
I think everybody knows this is not for long, one way or another. I mean, this is either going to be a huge grand slam or a massive strikeout, and I think it's going to be a huge grand slam. And look, when that happens, coaches get elevated, and I hope he's here as long as he can be, and I hope he wins as much as people thinks he's going to win. But ultimately, there's bigger jobs in the country. There's higher paying jobs in the country across the Big Ten and the SEC. So I've just been telling everybody, enjoy it while it lasts, because it's not going to be here forever, and just try to soak up every moment of this and enjoy the ride.
That's right. Live in the moment here. All right, switching gears a little bit. I hope some current or maybe future college athletes are watching this, because when it comes to NIL, this man walked so you all could run. Jeremy, please explain how nearly 20 years ago you sued the NCAA and got the ball rolling on the conversation surrounding NIL.
Well, before I went to college, I was the #1 ranked skier in the world and an Olympian as a senior in high school. And, if you're an Olympic athlete, you survive on endorsement money. I mean, that's how you pay for your season. That's how you travel the world and fund your coaches. And when I got to the University of Colorado, the NCAA said, well, you can't have a ski endorsement or a goggle endorsement or a helmet endorsement and play football at the University of Colorado. And I just thought it was so archaic. I'm like, how are you going to govern the sport of skiing? I'm not even coming here to ski, so ultimately they forced me to give up all my endorsements as an Olympic skier so that I could play amateur football. And that kind of kicked off this battle for student athlete rights that I've been a part of for the better course of 2 decades. And it was just incredibly gratifying to see the tide finally turn and to have student athletes have the same rights as their fellow student body, their coaches, the administrators, everybody else at the university. And I think it was an important step forward in the rights of college athletes. And it's fun to see how great they're doing today and capitalizing on this, and how much more money is flowing into the system. I mean, the NCAA's biggest argument was like, we can't do this because there's not enough money and it's going to take away from a lot of things. There's never been more money. There's never been more attention on college athletics. And I think that's a really good thing.
Absolutely. And 2 decades later, here it is. Well done. NIL has crashed the party. But when that happens, there will be skeptics. There are some calling it the wild, wild west. So Jeremy, from your vantage point, though, what is it like watching current players benefit off NIL?
Well, look, every sports league in the world has corporate endorsements. Athletes can make money. You and I can make money. Anyone can make money if you have a special talent and you have a company who wants you to endorse their product. Anyone can do that. The only people left out of that conversation were college athletes for many, many decades, because it was hidden under the guise of, quote, amateurism, which nobody really fully understood. But once lawmakers finally understood what amateurism was, it really flew in the face against civil rights. And the legislators in California turned this into a civil rights movement, and that's ultimately how they forced the NCAA's hand. But look, I'm part of the Olympics, and the Olympics modernized themselves in the 90s, and thank goodness they did. Otherwise, we would have never had the dream team, the basketball team, or any of the athletes that are competing today, because they would have been amateurism. And so, it's just gratifying, and I think it's good for everybody. It makes it a little bit harder for coaches and schools to keep talent and promise dollars. But that's a problem they have to solve.
Yeah, when you were at the forefront of this, I think it was maybe uncharted territory, right? We didn't really know what this would look like. Now that we do have NIL, do you have any recommendations or any room for improvement when you look at some of the recruiting inducements?
Yeah, look, there's some common sense things that exist at the Olympic level that don't yet exist at the college level that I think make sense. For example, I was part of the NGB of USA Skiing. And USA Skiing and Snowboarding has some corporate endorsements. We were, for a long time, endorsed by United Airlines, for one example. And so we as athletes couldn't go out and sign an endorsement contract with one of their competitors, say Delta Airlines. And if you look at these universities, they all have big corporate endorsements. Some are Nike schools, some are Under Armour schools. And I do think there's common sense logic to say, okay, well, if you play for a Nike school, you can't go, sign autographs for Reebok and those types of things. So I do think that there's some common sense things that make sense. But again, college football, college basketball, they don't have to look too far to see what makes sense, because every other league, the soccer leagues, football league, Olympic sports, they've all figured this out decades ago. So it's not rocket science.
Imagine if they had listened to you 2 decades ago, where we would be now. So we got to give it some time. It will figure itself out. Jeremy, thank you so much for the time today.
My pleasure. Go.
Great conversation on NIL there towards the end, but I want to switch back to this man. Deion's impact evident. Colorado calling it the prime effect. They are already reaping the rewards. You can see it financially through season tickets and merchandise sales, and of course socially with impressions and followers. And Blair, you asked Jeremy about the staying power with Deion at Colorado. He even admitted that he's kind of just living in the moment, soaking it all up, doesn't know how long this will all last. How can Deion, though, be a long-term solution for the Buffs?
Yeah, Coach Prime is going to have to build up the program. He has to build up Colorado and the city of Boulder as a destination for recruits. That school and that football team, they have to get to a point where it transcends what Deion brings or whatever Deion will accomplish there. It has to become a place that recruits look to, even if Deion won't be there in the future, and they look at it as a realistic option. As they look at it as a place where you can go and compete, get ready for the NFL, get ready to compete for conference and potentially national championships. I mean, this is what Colorado has been in the past, and I think what Deion Sanders can do by bringing in the elite talent that he's going to try to bring in is to potentially get Colorado to be back in that conversation.
Yeah, also looking to the future as we move closer to the eventual Power 2 in college football. We've already seen USC, UCLA making a jump for the Big Ten. Could you envision something similar from Deion Sanders and pushing Colorado into whatever the super conferences might look like?
Yeah, I mean, he's on his way to doing that, right? He's already got a camera crew following him around. It seems like he's the perfect soundbite for whatever he says. He is everywhere, Emily. And you heard Jeremy Bloom say that he thinks this is going to be a huge grand slam. Well, how about this? I was opening up a box of baseball cards, a 2022 version. You know I like a good prop.
Love it.
How about this guy right here? Deion Sanders pops up with the dollar signs on the knob. And that's Deion. He is everywhere right now. So, this is one of those things where I think that Colorado can get into a place where they become an attractive place, even if Deion won't be there. If he puts enough spotlight on them, there's no question that Colorado could be one of those mega earning schools.
Man, that is a spectacular little dose of history there. I think that also Jeremy mentioned Deion inspired him, to be a dual sport athlete. That is wonderful. Now, you mentioned Deion is everywhere. You know who else is everywhere? A lot of people working in college football right now. Look at these guys in living rooms. The final push is on to build out your 2023 class, and coaches, they're in living rooms all across the country enjoying some cookies by the Christmas tree, making their pitch. Okay, at least that's what I envision. We'll let these guys tell you what it's really like.
Hello, I'm Cooper Petagna alongside Andrew Ivins from Preps to Pros, or Oyster Boys, whatever you want to call us. Andrew, we are less than 2 weeks to National Signing Day, and we are in the middle of the winter contact period. The transfer portal officially opened on December 5th. We have coaches out on the road right now. We are in the midst of total chaos, my friend. But right now, a lot of the programs around the country and coaching staffs trying to bat down the hatches. What are these couple weeks like for coaching staffs across the country?
All about the in-home visits, right? You can see a prospect once every 7 days. The head coach can only see him once in this period, and they're traveling around the country trying to meet not only with their commits, but also trying to meet with the targets at the last second. You got the transfer portal going on as well. It's chaos right now. And it's funny. You go on social media, you see the private jets, the coaches are tweeting them out wearing their nice shoes. You'll see the guys in the helicopters, all that stuff. And Coop, I don't know, you were on the other side. You've had to coordinate this. I mean, just how crazy is it trying to piece and map together schedules? I mean, some of these coaches got to go to all-star banquets. Some of them are dealing with recruiting their own roster. It's complete chaos.
It's not a lot of fun, and things change, and that's why resources matter in terms of having enough people in the building that have experience when it comes to logistics and really travel operations. This is a lot of moving parts right now that you have to put in place. And you mentioned it, Drew. I've talked to a couple Power 5 coaches here recently that have really kind of had these couple of weeks circled on the recruiting calendar, interested to see how they're going to play out. And a lot of that had to do with the transfer portal. How are they going to handle new names that are in the transfer portal, and how is that going to impact their travel schedule with commit? So I think a lot of these staffs across the country are really going through this for the first time, reacting to it, and really just trying to learn on the fly. But Drew, let's get back to the in-home visits. Obviously, a lot of this is played out on social media. We've seen Jim Harbaugh climbing trees. We see Dan Lanning playing Monopoly. How much weight does this really hold with a prospect and their family?
It's huge. I talk to parents all the time, and I'll tell them early in the process, hey, you're going to get to that December, January period, and you better be ready to prepare your best meal. I mean, that head coach, that living legend, it could be Nick Saban, it could be Kirby Smart. They're going to sit in your living room, and really you get 1 hour with them, and it's full attention from those individuals. And it's important. I think you're just trying to make sure everything is in line. You want to make sure your questions are answered. You want to make sure they're not lying to you. And it seems pretty strategic in how schools figure it out. Hey, do I send my defensive coordinator? Do I send my whole defensive staff? Is it just, a position coach? I think it's different. And then these prospects, if you haven't decided, or maybe someone's trying to flip you, you got to juggle all this stuff, right? One school could leave and the other one could be sitting out in the parking lot right there. And I think that presents an interesting dynamic. I think for coaches, I mean, sometimes they have 3-4 visits in a day. That means you're eating 4 different dinners. If you're a Big Ten school coming down to South Florida for the first time, or you're going into the Atlanta Metro, I mean, you got to make the most bang for your buck. Because if you're that head coach, I mean, you're only going to be there one time, and then you got to jet out and see your next commit. So I think it's chaotic for everyone. I think it's a fun time, and us just trying to track it, it gets a little, your head starts spinning, it seems like at times.
Yeah, it's certainly case by case. I remember Aiden Hutchinson at Michigan, and this was more of a story about an official visit, but he was the most low maintenance prospect that we had in the class. You look back on him, the second pick in the most recent draft here out of Michigan, and there's some guys in the class that didn't pan out at the next level that you paid a lot of attention to. So in terms of how you divide up your resources and sending guys out on the road, it's definitely interesting. I think the other thing about this, we're starting to see some battles really come down to the finish line here. We talked about less than 2 weeks until early signing day. Some of these players, and because of some of these new hires, they have an official visit or two at their expense. I think a lot of these home visits are really used as a catalyst to try to get guys on campus so you can make that final push before going pen to paper. So certainly a lot of jockeying back and forth between coaching staffs as prospects try to gather all the information before they make the best decision for them. Drew, before we cap it off, any interesting stories or maybe 1 or 2 that stick out to you when it comes to home visits?
I remember it was like 4 or 5 years ago, right? Miami, Mark Richt, Todd Hartley, Oyster Boys, coaching staff member, honorary member. They were recruiting Will Mallory up in Jacksonville. And Will Mallory had a staff member working for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the only day that Mark Richt could go see him happened to be a Sunday, right? So Will Mallory sat in the stands up there in Duval and watched the game with Mark Richt. I thought that one was pretty cool. Also, I've heard stories of just guys eating meals that they don't like. I mean, think about it. You sit down in this prospect's living room, they serve shellfish, you're allergic. I mean, you're going to gut that thing out for a little bit, or some other meal that you don't like. So those are 2 that that stick out to me as ones that have been interesting. And Coop, the other thing I think what people don't realize is like the rich or the power brokers are set up for the best here. I mean, you're traveling around in private jets. I was talking to a Clemson staffer back in the spring, and he was all fired up because Clemson was close to getting their own second jet just devoted for football. Whereas maybe some of these other schools are all taking, commercial flights and having to rent cars and all that stuff. I mean, heck, Nick Saban back in January, I think he flew from one county to another. It was about a 2-minute flight in the air going from one private airport to the next just to see a pair of blue chippers. So it certainly helps if you have a healthy travel budget.
I think you're pulling out all the stops right now. I think we might have called Uncle Phil at the University of Oregon when I was there in Eugene just to try to get the Nike jet to maybe take a cross-country flight to pull in one of those 5 stars under Mario Cristobal. But a lot going on right now. Resources on full display as we see the winter contact period play out.
And Coop, the other thing is most of these coaches want that last face-to-face, right? If you use all your visits, you want to go in on Thursday or Friday. So I think next week is when those visits matter the most, right? I mean, we're talking about the big 5 stars. I know the 2 defensive linemen there in Alabama, James Smith, Quay Russaw. I mean, I'm sure everyone is trying to jockey to be, hey, we want to get that last dinner. We want to sit down at 9:00 at night with those 2. We don't want to be in for breakfast in the morning. We want to stay for desserts. We get that last face-to-face pitch.
I don't think it would shock you the amount of strategy that goes into trying to get the last word. And certainly a lot of those plans are made beforehand, weeks and weeks in advance. So a lot going on right now, a lot to unfold. Keep it locked with 24/7 Sports. We will have you covered over the next couple of weeks in the recruiting show. For Andrew Ivins, I'm Cooper Petagna.
Man, we need a 24/7 sports jet for this man, Steve Wiltfong, all over the place as we gear up for signing day. You're back here on the show to deliver some news about the number 2 overall player in the 23 class.
Yeah, 24/7 Sports has learned that 5-star quarterback Dante Moore, longtime Oregon commit, could trip to UCLA this weekend as Chip Kelly and that coaching staff take a swing on arguably the best quarterback in the country. They have Luke Duncan from in-state in the fold, but Dante Moore is the kind of guy that could be a difference maker for any program. Now, talking to sources with knowledge of this recruitment, I still like Oregon's position here. I think this could be just a dotting I's, crossing T's type thing that a lot of young men do here late in the process. But UCLA tracking to get a look from Dante Moore here late in the cycle. Now, Dan Lanning was out there last week. New Oregon offensive coordinator Will Stein was at Detroit King today. So he was able to meet with Dante and they were able to get to know each other as well. Still like Oregon here to hold on to Dante Moore here, but I know recruiting, people get nervous when young men take other visits, fans that follow it, but Dante Moore here, and he could visit UCLA this weekend.
Steve, if he does make it to Los Angeles this weekend for that official visit, you mentioned it, crossing the T's and dotting the I's. What have been some question marks for Dante Moore with this recruiting process, with his commitment to Oregon, with the new offensive coordinator, obviously Kenny Dillingham taking the head coaching job at Arizona State? There have been a lot of different rumors, a lot of different buzz with Dante Moore potentially looking at other schools. How does UCLA fit into this conversation now?
Well, I haven't heard anything regarding anything with Dante Moore and disappointment with Oregon or any questions. He's been talking weekly with Dan Lanning throughout the cycle, has a good relationship with him. Sounded like Coach Stein made an impression today on the folks at Detroit King and Dante. And so I think this is just one where, look, there's 2 weeks left in the process. Let me go out there and make sure that I'm doing the right thing here. There's been a lot of other schools that have called that he's not going to visit. So, and that's the case for a lot of prospects in America. Coaches are swinging for Hail Marys here late in the process with a lot of recruits here. I still like where Oregon stands with Dante Moore going into this UCLA visit, but it's an opportunity for the Bruins to, make a maneuver here, perhaps.
Yeah, Steve, let's play the hypothetical game. This is a player from the Midwest. UCLA is a school that is going into the Big Ten in a couple of years, and they're trying to get into that footprint. And then you look at what USC is doing across town. They already have their 5-star quarterback committed. There's a lot of different interesting dynamics working in play for UCLA here. How big would Dante Moore be for the future of that program?
Well, he's big for the future of any program, right? He's a guy that we say is the caliber of a signal caller that can lead you to a national championship. So certainly for UCLA, he's a guy that I think could keep their offenses prolific for years to come if he ended up there. I think that's the plan with Oregon too. Now you look at Oregon, they have Bo Nix under center perhaps next year. He'd be a Heisman Trophy candidate if he comes back. And then Dante Moore, I think it's wide open for him to compete for the job if Bo Nix leaves early, or be an understudy for a year and then take over a program that we think's on the rise from a talent perspective as well.
Whew. Steve, thank you so much for that update. I know Oregon fans are sweating a little bit right now, but we're getting close to signing day, and we appreciate you standing by for us. All right, let's switch gears to the transfer portal. Currently, 1,259 players are in the portal. That is a ton of guys. Top players available, though. We've got cornerback Denver Harris leading the charge, and then Fentrell Cypress, who we talked about earlier in the show. Some of the top quarterbacks available: Devin Leary, DJU, and Hudson Card. So I am officially labeling December as the most impactful month on the college football calendar. We're going to try our best to cover it all, but we're probably going to need some help to do it. So let's welcome in our national recruiting analyst, Brian Dohn. Brian, I'm adding transfer analyst to your title now too, because we're going to talk about that with you. Let's start with a North Carolina corner in Tony Grimes. According to his dad, he's seen over 300 schools reach out to him. And according to Brian, what's the latest on his recruitment? When can we see a decision?
Well, I think we're going to be a while before we see a decision, and that's kind of how this transfer portal is built right now. It's not built for quick decisions for kids that haven't long plans going in. And so with Tony, I spoke with his dad maybe an hour before we got on here, and he's in the process of still trying to set up visits. Right now, he is not going anywhere this weekend. There's some schools. Penn State's involved with them, Florida State, USC, Colorado, Oregon, Virginia Tech, Georgia, Texas A&M, South Carolina. I was also hearing that Syracuse was involved because of defensive coordinator Tony White, who, I'm sure you guys have read the reports, there's a chance he winds up at Nebraska. So if Tony White winds up at Nebraska, maybe Tony Grimes takes a look there. But one thing to keep in mind, and I'm not sure a lot of people realize this with transfer kids, is it's not just ending in 2 weekends for them. There's a window open from January 4th through January 8th. And in talking to to Tony's dad today, Deion Glover, he said that there's a really good chance he'll make a visit or two during that window. As a matter of fact, he said maybe 3, but I know sometimes Deion's ambitious with that stuff, but at least 2 visits in that window.
Brian, you're all over the map when it comes to tracking all this transfer portal movement. We're calling you the Tyler Adams of recruiting analysts. Let's get into Kent State wide receiver Dante Cephas. He has an official visit scheduled with Penn State this weekend. What's the latest on him?
Yeah, he's going to make that visit. The plan is he could not get there on Friday, so he's going to go in Saturday and leave on Sunday. Listen, he's a kid who really had a big-time year in 2021 at Kent State with 82 catches, 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns. Production dropped off a little bit this year, but that's more due to the players around him. A hot topic in terms of when you're talking to people about receivers. For me, I think he could make visits after that. He has nothing set. I don't know if he gets out of Penn State without committing, though. He's got a couple former teammates who are on that team. It's the in-state school. For folks that have not watched Penn State, boy, they need some explosion at the receiver position. I think he's a kid that offers it. He also brings size with it. If it's not him, maybe if it's not Penn State this weekend, maybe he'll visit Georgia, maybe he'll visit West Virginia or Notre Dame. He'll have a lot more options. But I know in talking to people the last day or two, the feeling is it's going to be tough for him to get out of Penn State without committing, just because, like I said, in-state school, a big need. And listen, everybody talks about, hey, you can be the next Jahan Dotson or maybe Chris Godwin or whomever. So there's a lot of things leaning Penn State's way on this one.
And they have been hurting for wide receiver talent ever since Jahan Dotson left for the NFL. Well, it was a chaotic day one of the portal opening for business. Quarterbacks really headlining it. NC State quarterback transfer Devin Leary getting a lot of interest because of what he did back in the 2021 season, those 35 touchdowns and just 5 picks. So who are some schools that we should keep an eye on for him?
Yeah, I think with Devin, I know I anticipated it moving a lot quicker than it has, and it really has not. I talked to his dad about it for the last few days, and the latest was he is not going to visit anywhere this weekend. And it goes back to what I said before. This is tough. They went in the portal on Monday, and it's like speed dating. And so they got to figure out who they're going to. Are they comfortable with the coaches? Are they comfortable with the offense? Are they comfortable with what the coaches are saying about the depth chart? Because for Devin Leary, he's got one more year. He's got to go somewhere where he plays. So, when you ask about schools, Notre Dame's involved. We'll see what happens with them and Hudson Card. Auburn has reached out. UCLA, who's looking for a quarterback, ideally a transfer for 1 year. South Carolina has reached out because you want to see what's going to happen with Spencer Rattler. Kentucky has reached out, even though I keep hearing about Graham Mertz with Kentucky. And then, Oregon has reached out too because they're also looking for quarterback help. But you look at a guy like Devin Leary, and he's coming back from a torn pec. He had surgery. In talking to some folks, he's not going to be able to start throwing until February. Ideally, he wanted to go to the NFL draft. If you can't throw until February, that kind of puts a crimp in that in terms of workouts. Last year he was amazing, 35 touchdowns, more than 3,000 yards against 5 interceptions. Like I said, got hurt this year, had the surgery in October. Also had a broken leg 2 seasons ago. It was at 2020, if my math is right. So there's also a little bit of injury concerns when schools are dealing with them.
Brian, Maryland transfer CJ Dupree, one of the better tight ends available in the transfer portal, is scheduled to take an official visit to South Carolina later this month. Are the Gamecocks the only contender, or who else is in the suitor list for CJ Dupree?
This is how this stuff moves. He's going to be at Alabama this weekend on an official visit. And, he is a kid that has made a big move in recruiting. He was a quarterback in high school, and the plan was to go to Maryland, play tight end, develop there. Well, he developed. He had 30 catches, 314 yards, was a reliable receiver in short yardage situations. And Blair, this is going to sound a little strange, but don't count out Rutgers on this one, because when he decided to go to Maryland, it was between Rutgers and Maryland. He ultimately chose Maryland. Well, he went in the portal, and Rutgers coach Greg Schiano flew down to the D.C. area and spent a few hours with him having dinner earlier in the week. And the word I got was he was not going to make an official to Rutgers because he had already been there, knew the program, and had a great relationship with Schiano. So we'll see what happens when he gets to Alabama. Alabama, as you guys well know, it is tough to turn down the Crimson Tide when you're looking to play on that kind of stage. But we'll see what happens.
Hey, you mentioned Rutgers. Great transition to my next question. Former 3-star corner Jaden Bellamy is transferring from Notre Dame with 4 years of eligibility left. You have the crystal ball in for him to end up at the aforementioned school, Rutgers. So what's the latest with him?
Yeah, going through the process, they went out and visited with Bellamy out in South Bend. He was also with his family back in New Jersey. He's a legacy for Rutgers. His dad, Jay Bellamy, played in the NFL for a long time, played at Rutgers. When it came down to it, the relationship, again, that Schiano had with the family was really strong. At the end of the day, Jaden picked Notre Dame. He got past a little bit on depth chart with some other corners that went in at Notre Dame. From my understanding, he was not totally comfortable there, looking to get back closer to home. I've heard Pitt involved with them. Again, Syracuse, we'll see what happens there with Tony White. Boston College got involved. Penn State, which was one of his finalists when he was going through the process, also checked in with him. But if everything goes as it's supposed to, I expect that he'll wind up at Rutgers.
Elijah Judy, another big name in the transfer portal, the Texas A&M transfer, has 4 visits already set up, Brian, including one to Colorado in January. What's the latest on Elijah Judy, and who else besides Colorado is in the running?
Yeah, and I think this goes back to what I said before about how it's almost like speed dating. So he's going to be at Nebraska this weekend and check him out there, and he sees the depth there, and he thinks he can get on the field early. From there, he's going to go to Boston College for a midweek visit that starts Wednesday. It's going to run Wednesday to Friday. Then he's going to go, well, right now to Syracuse on that, Friday to Sunday deal. And then he's going to sit back, evaluate some things, and he's going out to Colorado. It's in that June 4th to 8th window. He's not exactly sure when it's going to be. One of the defensive analysts, Coach Williams, who was at Texas A&M, is now at Colorado. So there's the connection there. But it goes back to what I said earlier. There's a lot of things that these kids, and you guys see how old I am, so they're all kids to me. But you see how these kids, are forced to really make these quick decisions. And hey, you go in the portal. I guess the flip side is you go in it, you deserve that you have to make a quick decision and be thankful that you have that option. But if you look at Elijah Judy, who said during that window in January, he could sneak in another visit there as well. So we'll see what happens with him. But I'm really curious to see how it goes with Nebraska and then also with Colorado, to be honest.
Yeah, you called this speed dating, not the first time we've heard that reference. Our friend Coach Carl Reed also referring to it as speed dating, so that means that you're also a dating analyst now, Brian. Thank you. I appreciate it. Be sure to follow him on Twitter at BrianDohn247 and read his work on 247sports.com. Don't forget about this, our signing day show on December 21st. We will have wall-to-wall coverage on the 247 Sports YouTube page. Here's a hot tip for you. Subscribe right now while you're thinking about it, and you will be ready to go for that big day. Speaking of big, it's time, our favorite time in the show. Blair, shall we answer some viewer questions?
Do it.
Yes? Okay. I was hoping you would say yes. That would be really awkward if you would have said no. James asks, is Dylan Edwards a lock to go to Colorado?
Emily, I tend to stay away from the word lock in recruiting, especially this close to signing day. But I do like where the Buffs stand. Dylan Edwards decommitted from Notre Dame earlier today, and this is a couple days after that Colorado offer, and Deion Sanders is now prime position to potentially land a top prospect from the state of Kansas. I spoke a little bit with Alan True, our national analyst who covers the Midwest, and he told me that he felt really good about where Colorado stands. And if we read between the tea leaves, the decommitment from Notre Dame obviously speaks to his interest in Deion Sanders. So not a lock, but I think they're in a really good spot.
Yeah, no locks, no using pen, Sharpie. This is all pencil, and it is all very fluid. This next question comes from Ben saying, does Michigan have a good chance of flipping Cameron Brandt from Stanford?
I think they have a good chance, but they also have some competition by the way of UCLA and Texas. So a couple other schools are trying to make a push there for the Stanford commit. And the Cardinal have become that program that other teams are trying to pluck and maybe, in a way kind of go after, considering that they don't have a head coach yet, considering the type of season that they just had. And that commit list is looking really enticing to a lot of other teams. And Cameron Brandt is just obviously one of those players that the likes of Michigan, that the likes of Texas and UCLA are making a strong push for. It sounds like he will take an official visit out to Ann Arbor, but I would also keep an eye on the other two schools.
Yeah, having a head coach in place, certainly important. Latest reports indicate that former Dallas Cowboys, NFL head coach Jason Garrett is a finalist for the position, so we'll see what happens there. This next one comes from Nicholas. How big of a loss would it be if Dante Moore didn't sign for Oregon? And just to catch you up, if you didn't hear the news earlier, Steve Wiltfong joined us to tell us that Dante Moore, the number 2 player in the 23 class, is visiting UCLA this weekend. He still believes, though, that Oregon is in the running for his services. So what do you think? How big a loss would that be?
It would be a huge loss for the Oregon Ducks. This is a program that I think year in and year out has been taking some big swings nationally, and they landed basically their number 1 quarterback target in this cycle in Dante Moore. And to lose him this close to signing day, this close to the enrollment, this close to him getting on campus would be huge. It's obviously even worse if you lose him to a program that you beat on the field during the season and a program that, is in your conference for the time being. So I think, given all the resources, given all the time and effort that they put into landing this 5-star quarterback, it would be a monumental loss for the Ducks. We heard Steve Wiltfong report that he still feels good about Oregon, and this UCLA visit could just be, a case of Dante Moore trying to take a look at another option close to signing day. But if it does happen, and if he does sign with another school, I think we'll remember that time when Dante Moore did not sign with Oregon.
Or maybe he just wants to go to LA for December. I mean, I don't know why we're ruling that out.
By the way, it's supposed to rain on Sunday. So Dante, maybe you should have picked a better
Breaking
weekend.
news. I mean, we should bring Steve Wiltfong back for that. It's going to rain in LA on Sunday. Okay, you need to keep an eye on that. We have one more question, or no, we have two more questions here. Tyler Chambers asking, will UCLA be as active in the transfer portal as they have been in the past?
Absolutely. You already heard Brian Dohn mention UCLA a couple times. This is a program who already has 2 transfer portal commitments by the way of Penn and Cal. They're obviously recruiting at a different scale than maybe some other programs, particularly given the academic requirements to get into UCLA. But then you look at the roster makeup, you look at the trajectory of how they've built that depth chart. It's with a lot of older talent. It's with experienced players. And UCLA is going to be one of the more active teams and the active participants in the transfer portal. I do not expect them to slow down, especially considering the low number of commitments that they have on the high school ranks. Obviously, you want to add a Dante Moore to that group and potentially, be in the conversation to take over for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. But I would expect them to be in the market at every key position, especially considering who they're losing to the NFL.
Something that could slow them down, though, that rain coming this weekend could make things a little bit more difficult for them in the portal. All right, let's finish up here. Football Kid 10. Where will Keon Keeley end up? Wonderful question. Do you know, Blair?
That's a tough one. That might be more of a Steve Wiltfong question. For the longest time, Alabama's been considered the school to beat. He's obviously very high on Ohio State. He was formerly committed to Notre Dame. But I think the Crimson Tide, considering the number 1 class that they're building and all the buzz that they've had throughout the cycle and in the season, I would tend to agree with Steve Wiltfong in believing that Alabama and Nick Saban can close and close strong with a player like Keon Keeley.
Yeah, that would be a nice piece to add to an already spectacular class. Blair, thank you so much, and thank you for joining us. Alongside Blair Angulo, I'm Emily Proud, and this is the College Football Recruiting Show.